What happens when Harry Potter forgets who he is? He becomes a backpacker to find himself again. Yossi is a young lad expecting more from life than society is able to give him. He seeks freedom, what it means to be alive, and potent hallucinogenics to understand what Mike Tyson meant when he spoke about the toad.
I like birds that fly.
In this video, we follow the true story of Yossi and his friends, look at the mistakes they make, and figure out better ways on how to beat the jungle in Jungle 2017. Yossi is currently in Bolivia where he meets a Swiss guy named Marcus. They instantly click and spend some time together. Once they have arrived at their hostel, they come across an American guy named Kevin. Marcus, the Swiss guy, and Kevin, the American guy, are great friends and both strong members of the backpacker community in South America. They have met on a recent trip through Patagonia before they both came to Bolivia. During this first initial night, Yossi is also able to tick off his first task on his to-do list. I might add here that sipping on a strong hallucinogenic given to you by a complete stranger, even when she's hot, is a very big no-no. That is sort of like a big Swiss flag without the cross waving an inch away from your face. In all seriousness though, he survives this night and is able to keep his purse and other possessions as well. The next day, the trio continues their journey and visit La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. There, Yossi comes across a random Austrian adventurer whose name is Carl. They end up having a drink and talk about life and its meaning. Now, for many people, being picked up by a complete stranger is a frightening experience. But for travelers and explorers, these events often lead to some of the best and most special experiences in life. Although a red flag to many, this is a golden flag to Yossi here. They chat casually until Carl starts talking about a hidden community living deep inside the jungle of Bolivia. A community off the beaten track, far away from modern civilization, locked away from society and normal people. Now I don't know about y'all, but this seems too good to be true. The way he uses keywords like hidden world, authentic life, once in a lifetime adventure, it really feels more like a cheap sale done by a great salesman. I mean, the only thing's missing is mentioning El Dorado. Now, I'm not gonna lie though, I would probably be that guy that is stupid enough to join. But I don't pretend like that this isn't the dumbest thing you could possibly do, because it clearly is. In any way, before you join a complete stranger with a gun into the jungle of a country you've only known for 5 days, there are a few steps to lower the stupidity level of your impulsive and reckless decision that will probably break your mother's heart. First, I would contact the reception of my hostel. Those people are almost always locals, know the tourism in that area and can help out a great deal. Ultimately, they would beat the jungle before I even get the chance to beat it myself. Second, you research this hidden gem. Your two friends are huge members of the backpacker community of this continent. If anybody knows anything, it's them or their network of elephant pants wearing people. In any way, being interested in this risky adventure is completely fine, and I understand that. But blindly trusting everything a stranger says without checking if it's true is nothing short of insane. And that is exactly what Yossi does. He blindly trusts this man, returns back home, and tries to convince his friends to join. This is actually a genius move though. It's reckless, but genius. Because instead of going alone, convincing your friends to risk their lives alongside of you is a smart way to avoid dying in solitude. The next day, all of them meet Carl, and equipped with his Indiana Jones map, he can convince the others as well. They buy the groceries, pack their stuff, and fly to the nearest airport from where they will embark on their epic and possibly last adventure through the jungle of Bolivia. The hike will last for about 6 days and is split into 2 parts. They first need to get to a village about midway through, and then from there hike the last part along the river to reach the hidden gem Carl mentioned. The first part goes pretty smooth. The gringos struggle with normal stuff like humidity, the weight of their backpacks, and of course the occasional showers pouring down. But it becomes obvious during one of the first nights that they didn't pack enough food. Who in God's name runs out of food after 2 days on a 6-day hike through an unexplored area? Even back in the 80s, canned food was a thing, and looking at their massive backpacks, it looks like they have had enough space to pack enough food. Hunting is a great skill, don't get me wrong. But let's not pretend like we didn't start in a town where corner shops were a thing. Running out of food within 2 days is not just a red flag, it's a sign that nobody put in the slightest thought for this adventure. This would convince me to turn around and leave. This is the perfect setup for a sure death lying ahead. Apart from that, everything else runs more or less smooth, until they finally reach their first checkpoint. Everything is all nice and beautiful. They sleep well, eat great food, dance with the butterflies, and smoke indigenous herb. I mean, why bother continuing if this place holds everything you could have ever wished for? This is as non-touristic as it gets. If I were them, I would just stay here. But arriving here also means that Carl is a trustworthy guy, right? If he planned to murder us or lure us into oblivion, he would not have brought us here to meet all these wonderful people. As a matter of fact, all of them seem to know him, meaning he has been here before, adding to the narrative that he may indeed be a good guy. Well, we will see. The squad continues their journey, but this time around, things become very desperate very quickly. In my humble opinion, the worst thing always is turning against each other, especially when you are surrounded by a hostile environment. That is also the reason why the military focuses so much on teamwork. The quality of the teamwork either breaks or makes the task. Now here comes the challenge. Marcus' feet are full of nasty bloody blisters caused by wet socks and sturdy boots. He is in extreme pain and slows down the whole group, which sucks, but hey, it could have happened to anyone, right? Yossi and Kevin are annoyed and start turning against him. During the night, they let him know just how much of a nuisance he is, and this is a deadly mistake. Turning against each other is bad, but in a jungle where teamwork is the most important thing, this is just ridiculously stupid. I mean, either you leave him back, which means he will die, or you bring him back home or continue with him just at a slower speed, or you camp for a few days until he can recover, which really is the best solution here. Now I would chill at this riverside for the time being, catch some fish, vibe with the jungle and just have a good time, right? I mean, these people came for the experience of nature, yet they're busy stressing around like people in the city. And their toxic behavior leads them into a deadly trap. You see, the next day the two argue with Carl about what to do. They are fed up with Marcus' slow speed and look for an alternative. Against Carl's opinion though, the two demand to build a raft and float down the river instead. Which, to be honest, sounds like a pretty solid idea. But floating down an unknown river with a homemade raft inside a jungle is a pretty risky thing to do. In the end, however, Kevin and Yossi get what they want and end up building the raft to float down the river. Until the first rapid sets in. The most dangerous thing about river rapids is the fact that you will probably die. It's difficult to maintain a stable position, and with the floating debris all around you, you are pretty much set up for death. In such a case, you should always keep your legs downstream, keep yourself on your back, and balance yourself out with your arms. Now, as soon as you can, you should try to get to land, obviously. Now, if you want to know more about this, we have applied the same strategy in our recent video where we have escaped the serial killer in Alone. Now, they can save themselves, but not without a price. The group is completely torn in half. The trust and respect for each other is gone, and this is pretty much the worst possible outcome. The next day, the two most out of touch characters ever plot a nasty game to convince Marcus to stick with Carl instead, so that they can proceed alone without having a bad conscience. Talking about toxic behavior. They set up a story, convince Marcus to stick with Carl, and lo and behold, are on their way, once again, floating down the river that has almost killed them the day before. It doesn't take very long until the rapids set in again, but this time the duo can't manage the water. They crash into a huge rock and only barely clinch onto it. And in case you haven't noticed, this is a pretty bad spot to be in, not gonna lie. Especially if this was the result of your impatience, Jesus. Now Kevin jumps into the river and saves himself, leaving Yossi alone. Before he can save his friend, Yossi loses the grip and falls into the rushing river and is almost killed. He somehow survives this horrific event and is washed ashore on the other side of the canyon. This is very bad. Not only are you completely out of energy at this point, but you're also likely to have open wounds. And any open wound in an environment such as a jungle is lethal. Without any antibiotics and first aid kit, you almost certainly end up with bad inflammation. And that inflammation, while you are starving and barely getting any sleep, is pretty damn terrible. Here's what I would do. I would strip myself naked, immediately hang my clothes up to dry, and then wait for the next day to arrive. Wet clothes are lethal, and aimlessly wandering around in the jungle after dark? No thanks. The rocky environment at this river is the perfect place to shield off the wind, but it's also a great environment to avoid venomous animals. When the next day arrives, I would stick to the river and follow it back to where I came from. Now, there is a good chance, of course, that you will not find your friends anymore, but this route is the best solution we have. But Yossi does it differently. Just moments after having survived this madness, he climbs up the wall and tries to get back to Kevin. So far, so good. But then he hears a clanking noise coming from beneath. He rushes down, jumps into the water, and can grab his backpack just in time. Now, even though this is a blessing, at this point Yossi does the worst possible thing. Instead of sticking to the river and trying to follow it, he walks straight into the jungle. It is beyond me how anyone would think that this is a good idea. This river is literally the only thing around giving you any sort of direction. Why would you leave it? He camps inside the jungle instead, wanders aimlessly around, and only the next day actually finds the map in his backpack. Not only is he hungry at this point, but he is also lost. So from being heavily bruised and almost killed the day before, he thought it would be a good idea to also get lost. Well, suit yourself, my friend. You see, surviving without food is possible for weeks. Surviving without water is possible for a few days only. This river looked pretty wet to me. Sticking to it would not only give me proper direction, but it would also keep me hydrated. At this point, however, comes the real shocker. A day or two after he has left the river, he faces off a jaguar. Now, if you have paid attention, you would have noticed that this dude has a lighter. And the lighter means fire. And the fire means you can generate smoke. And smoke is visible. At this point, my plan of staying near the river where he was washed ashore becomes even more obvious. There, he could have burned enough green leaves to create a smoke signal rising unobstructed into the sky. Smoke signals, as we all know, are potent ways to draw attention to you. That stuff is visible miles away. So while Yossi continues his aimless wander and hot hallucinations, Kevin tries to gather a team of locals to search for his lost friend. 3 weeks have passed since Yossi's disappearance, and the local police doesn't think he is still alive. But he insists and is eventually sent to a local fisherman that knows the jungle well. With determination, he can convince him to help, and both of them get ready for their search. By now, Yossi has found an indigenous woman that also seems to be lost. However that is possible, I don't know, but we will figure it out. They stick together and wander around aimlessly together as well. Why not? He spends the day suffocating her with conversations that she doesn't seem to understand, and the nights trying to protect her from whatever lies out there. I guess this woman sort of gives him purpose. At least until he hugs her and realizes that he has been tripping for multiple days straight. This woman never existed. If you needed another reason to give up, this is it. I mean, at this point, most people could not continue. Not only are you completely worn out, but realizing that your own mind doesn't work anymore is scary. For what it's worth, you could have already passed villages without even realizing it. If I was this, I would look for a toad, grab it quickly, pray its venom is a psychedelic, and lick it like a lollipop. If I'm gonna die here, I'ma go with style. Anyway, as he continues, he ends up, you guessed it, at the river again. He finally decides that this is a good spot to be at and eventually decides to stay. And as luck would have it, the next day Kevin passes this route with his native scout, and they just barely are able to spot Yossi. Now, you either are lucky or you make your luck. In my opinion, he had better cards than he played. The lighter, the map, and the river were all means to an end for his misery. Yet he didn't use these things to his advantage. What do you think? Where did he go wrong and what would you have done instead? I'm very thankful you have made it this far. With that said, binge another one. Peace out.